Own the Road with Kelly and Bob, the USA 250 Tour, brought to you by Mueller.
We, the people of the United States of America.
Hello, and thanks for joining us for this special edition of On the Road with Kelly and Bob, the USA 250 Tour. I'm Bob Phillips.
And I'm Kelly Phillips. Now, this entire program today and all of the shows we produce during this calendar year will be part of the celebration of the 250th birthday of these United States of America.
Yep, so for this first segment, we are in, where else? Concord, Massachusetts. Yep, the same place you heard about in history class. The site of the famous shot heard round the world that started the American Revolution way back when. You know, that thing you heard about in your American history classes when you were a kid, but probably didn't think much about it because, well, it happened so long ago that it just couldn't possibly matter in your life, right?
But guess what? It did, and it does. And this year, this 250th birthday of our country is the perfect time to give it some thought. We're visiting today with a historian who grew up in Concord, a guy who can tell us how this all happened.
I'm Joe Palumbo. I grew up in Concord. We were an Italian immigrant family, lived on the very edge of town. We were farmers. And my dad always told me, whatever you do, don't become a farmer. I didn't understand that when I was little. But he was like, you must get education, get education. So as a kid, when you grow up in a little town like this, they just pound history into your head. My first job off the farm was actually a tour guide at Louisa May Alcott's house. So I had this in my blood, and then I went to college, and I got a history degree. And I became a history teacher. Went out to California. I was a teacher and principal for many years, but I always loved history. Even when we were out in Long Beach, California, we with the kids would have them dress up and we'd reenact the old North Bridge.
Joe Palumbo says it's hard to grow up in a place like Concord, Massachusetts, and not be immersed in the story of our nation.
After all, this is where the Revolutionary War officially started. Though skirmishes involving patriots and British soldiers had gone on for years. More on that later. But suffice it to say, Joe Palumbo grew up with America's story in his DNA. And now, during the 250th birthday of the United States of America, that story is more important than ever to Joe.
So now in semi-retirement, I moved back here, and then I thought, I used to give tours. I should do that again. So I started giving tours again. And what's so interesting is the history we talk about now is much thicker and fuller and deeper than a lot of the history I was even taught in school. So that's a lot of the work we're trying to do here. Tell the story of everyone who built the country and everyone's place in it.
Go back for a minute to your school days, to those classes on American history. You know, the one where you learned about George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, Ben Franklin, and John Adams, about places with names like Lexington and Concord, about events at Williamsburg, Philadelphia, and Valley Forge. It's all a big blur, right? Names of dead white people and dates from a time that must have been eons ago.
But Joe Palumbo says while our history did include all of that, the real story was about ordinary people. Everyday men and women, people of color, people who were farmers and bakers and boot and quilt makers. People with one thing in common. They wanted to be free and have a say in their own destiny. And he says the stories we were told as kids, they were only part of the truth.
We all might know the poem where Paul Revere yelled, "The British are coming." Well, a couple of things.
The British are coming. The British are
He
coming.
would never have said the British. Think about why he wouldn't say it. They were all British. It'd be like saying, there are people coming, right? That's not very specific, right?
Who cares?
So he would have said the
neighbors are coming.
Right, the regulars are on the march, the redcoats are out, the lobsterbacks are on the way. That's one thing. So that's only in the poem. That never really happened.
So that got cleaned up over the years into the British are coming.
And he wasn't the only person riding that night. There were over 40 riders that night spreading the message. Some of them were women, some of them were people of color. But we wrote a poem in 1863. I think the most important thing people need to know is that the country was built by everyone. Everyone had a piece in it, and everyone was fighting for freedom. And that initial fight for freedom took us part way, but it inspired us to keep going. That's why the Civil War expanded it further, World War II, all our conflicts have kept America's freedom expanding because of what happened here that day.
So what exactly did happen that started all this? Why were people so mad they were willing to go to war with the world's largest army?
Well, it all goes back to a new young king 3,000 miles away in England. And he needed money.
There's a new king, King George III, young guy. When you're 24.
You're going to change the world.
Right, you know a thing or two. You have the largest army and navy in the world, so he has this big French and Indian War. Costs a lot of money. George needs money, puts taxes on these folks. The tea tax, why is tea so annoying to people, right? You think about its daily use. Nobody in colonial America drinks water. It's unsafe, right? So you got to boil it. So if you're going to boil it, you might as well flavor it. So they drink tea or cider or beer. They throw the tea in the harbor, December 16th, 1773. It's over 300 chests. Thousands of pounds of tea. So much tea goes in the harbor, they pay little kids to push it back in because they didn't want it to use. They want it destroyed. Well, that's $1 million worth of damage. So when the king found out about that, he sends over a general and 5,000 troops to put Boston under martial law. Sam Adams and John Hancock come up to these little towns like Lexington, Concord, and says, they've got 5,000 troops in Boston. How do you know they're not going to come to your little town?
They're stirring the pot.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And every town has a militia. And a militia is every man 16 to 60 has to, on a yearly service, show up with their weapon and protect the town. It's like the only police force you have is your little town militia. So they said, you better beef up those militias. So these little towns get organized. They store extra weapons and store gunpowder and maybe food or hardtack, you had to feed an army. So they're storing a lot of stuff, particularly out here in Concord. And then one thing they do that really, we believe now, ticks the general off, they go to Boston Common and they steal 4 cannon. So when the general finds out there's 4 of these cannon out in Concord, he doesn't want King and Parliament to find it. It's embarrassing. So he says, okay, in secret, on the night of April 18th, 1775, we're going to march 700 troops out to Concord. We're not going to hurt anybody, and we're going to find any of that stuff they're not supposed to have, and we're going to find those cannon. And that's what brings them here to Concord on that day.
And in this case, the rest really is history. Shots were fired, people were killed, and the battle between the sometimes ragtag colonists and the mighty British Army went on for years. And for us, well, it all worked out in the end.
But Joe Palumbo says people back then, the ones who were in the middle of the skirmishes, the fighting, the pain and suffering and sorrow, didn't know at that time that in the end, everything would be okay. And that, he says, is the real history lesson here. What is it about history that you love so much?
Because when you talk about history, we're in the future, we look back, and it sounds like it all happened in order. But to those people who were living it, they were random, frightening events. The Tea Party, Bunker Hill, but they made it through, and they made a better place. Think of the Civil War, how frightening that was to people. But we were a better country. We're freer and more equal. Think of World War I, World War II, when women fought the rights to vote, civil rights, you name it, right? We always end up in a better place. So that's why when I talk to folks about history, people go, oh, nowadays, our world, our country. That's just because we're in the middle of stuff. We're going to figure it out. We always do. America is more free and more equal than it's ever been. Why are we not going to keep it? We're just as smart as anyone else in history.
And because of history, you're optimistic.
Yeah, because it always works out.
Okay, Kelly, so this conversation with Joe Palumbo was so fascinating and eye-opening that you and I hated for it to end. So let's listen to more of our time with Joe, starting with just why the colonists were so upset about having to pay taxes to the king.
It's not like they never paid taxes before, but usually they would vote for it themselves, right? We're going to fix the bridge. We're going to build a road. We vote little town, the city. This is the first tax that came to them from England, from the king and parliament. They'd never been asked their opinion. That's where you get no taxation without representation. Sam Adams, John Hancock, some of the Sons of Liberty were good at getting people stirred up, and the protest started. And these weren't like quiet little people with signs. Like when they would protest, they'd throw rocks. It was very, very violent. Some people called Boston the toddler of the American colonies.
It's like a spoiled two-year-old. Yeah.
So you know, if you raise a toddler,
Yeah.
right? If you give in to the toddler when they have a fit, what are you encouraging?
Yeah.
So with king and parliament take the tea stamp tax out, the first tax on sugar. Oh, they have a fit. They take it off. They try one on paper. They have another fit. They finally do the one on tea, and it just keeps going and going.
We hear about the shot heard round the world. But then we hear Lexington and Concord. Which was it? Lexington or Concord? Come on now.
They've been fighting about this since about 1825, so I'm sure today we'll resolve it all.
Of course.
Right?
We're counting on you, Joe.
The British troops march out. They're headed to Concord to get the cannon. The only way to get to Concord is you go through Lexington. It's one road. So they go through Lexington Center at dawn. There are some Lexington Minutemen on town, but on the common there's a skirmish, and they kill 8 of the Lexington Minutemen. Some people would call that the beginning of the American Revolution. However, no Minutemen were given the order to fire back. They were fired at.
And they were just a local militia, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So the British come to Concord. That's their ultimate goal, right? Because they've got to find those cannon. They take over the center of town. Someone says, the cannon are up at Barrett's farm. So the general says, send 200 troops up there, 100 to hold the bridge, 100 to go to the farm. The Minutemen have all left town. They're up on a hill over town. The British back in the center find some stuff. They light it on fire. The Minutemen see the fire, the smoke. They think they're burning the town down. And they say, shall we let them burn the town down? No. So the Minutemen start marching back towards town. They meet the British troops at the bridge. There's a miscommunication. The British fire into them, and 2 Minutemen lose their lives instantly. And they're given the order to fire back. And their commander says, fire! For God's sake, fire. And they shoot into the British troops. In Concord, we call that the shot heard round the world, because it was the first given order to commit treason. Fire into your own countrymen. That shot was heard round the world because that moment when those men got that order to fire, they were committing an act of treason and sparking the American Revolution. So we consider this moment, this creation of the nation that will follow over the next 8-10 years, is heard around the world because everyone knows who the United States is now, and all the work we've done to expand freedom and equality starts with those shots heard at the bridge.
What if those British soldiers would have said, yeah, there's not much here, and they turned around and left?
If it hadn't happened, it would have happened some other time, because the countryside was ready. They were primed to restore their rights, because they had lost a lot of their rights. Their rights to town meeting and their rights to votes had been taken as punishment for the Tea Party. So they felt that they were wanting to regain their rights. 2 things. One, not everybody was a patriot. So there were some people who believed in the king and country, and they were loyalists. So there was a division, and even in New England. But generally, historians talk about your colony is sort of determined by where your folks came from in England, right? And so our particular, the sort of East Anglica, or the town called Boston in England, we had a lot of Puritans who founded the Massachusetts Bay Colony, and they had a particular sort of inclination towards self-government and little townships making their decisions on their own. So it's kind of built in to our ethos. When they would go after a tax collector's house, one day over the Stamp Act, they burst in Boston, they burst in the tax collector's house, they rip all the plaster off the wall, and they take his furniture in the street, chop it up, and light it on fire. Like, that's what a tax protest was. You could see how the king and parliament were like, oh, these people.
What was this house that we're sitting in?
This is the Robbins House, and it's home of a free black man right after the American Revolution. His name's Caesar Robbins. He fought in the American Revolution as an enslaved man. And then he was free at the end of the revolution.
Was that part of the deal? Hey, go fight for our freedom, and
And
I'm
then
gonna
we'll
release
make you free?
We're not sure.
Okay.
But we for Caesar. But in general, we now know over 5,000 men of color fought in the American Revolution. And we know the first book about patriots of color was actually written by a black author in 1850. So we did know about it. With the 20th century, we did a good job forgetting about it. So a lot of the work we're doing now for the 250th is revealing all these sources. On the day of April 19th, 1775, everyone had to show up, no matter what color you were, because it was a general alarm. If I was a free person and I was a male, I was expected to show up that day. So now the National Parks research has shown we've got at least 60 documented men of color who fought on April 19th. But that's only the documented ones. We know there's tons more that we haven't yet been able to find the paperwork on. By the time of Bunker Hill, that number went up. And when George Washington came up to take care of the army, he couldn't believe all these men of color with guns. He's like, what's going on here? And they're like, that's how we do it in Massachusetts. And the actual colonial forces were the most integrated fighting force in American history until the Korean War. And I think why telling the stories of patriots of color are so important is it helps everyone see that everyone built the country. So everyone has a piece of it. I mean, Boston, 15% of the colonial population were folks of color, black, mixed race, indigenous, people from the Caribbean, because we were, a center, a trading place. But all the movies we all grew up with, everybody was white, so you just assumed it's true, but it's not true at all. We actually know we were diverse here from the very beginning. Paul Revere doesn't even make it to Concord. He gets to Lexington, stops at the tavern, and then he gets arrested.
What's he doing?
About a mile out of town.
You told me.
He doesn't even get to Concord.
On the night when the British were coming, Paul Revere stopped at the bar for a pint.
Well, exactly. That's how we were taught. I mean, he doesn't really stop there. Did he have a pint? I'm sure he did. He's not drinking water. I don't think he's having tea. At
that time of night.
Because people were drinking cider and beer all the time. If you went back in colonial times, you would be slightly inebriated the whole time. Because people just drank alcohol. Another good one is John Hancock. You know how we see his big signature?
Yes.
Yeah.
And we used to get taught in school that John Hancock wrote so large on the Declaration of Independence because he wanted the king to see it without his spectacles. That's what I was taught in school.
Sure.
What a great story, but it's not really true.
No.
He's the president of the Continental Congress. So he's the only one who has to sign the Declaration. So it's all done. He just signs it. But then all the other guys are like, hey, I want to put my name on there too. Well, you can, but you got to fit it in. Because a lot of us got taught top-down history, just like the famous, dates and dead people.
Right.
But for those people to do what they did, it's the people who helped run the household or the people that fought. There's all these other people that made history happen. That I think those stories are interesting.
Ordinary people making us free.
And
that's kind of a cool thing, isn't it?
And that way, exactly, ordinary people making us free. And that way you see nowadays, we each have a role to play in making our community good and making our state good and making our nation good. Because that's all that never makes a difference is regular people. When you do stories of regular folk. If you're Ralph Waldo Emerson, they saved your pen, the chair you sat in. George Washington once touched this. But when you're regular folk, it's harder to do. You got to look hard to find their stories, but they're there, and that's what more of the research is about.
But there were a lot of just guys and just women. And all of that, weren't there, that made this all happen?
There's a lot of lists of firsts in Massachusetts. They allowed women to vote in 1880 before anyone else did. So I think that's why I have a lot of pride in Massachusetts. At Concord, I think we have not only the original story, but a history in the 19th century of writers like Louisa May Alcott, Henry David Thoreau, who thought about and really created sort of like this sort of intellectual belief in this expansion of the individual. When you read Henry David Thoreau talks a lot about I want to live simply, so when it comes time to die, I will not know I had not lived. So that sort of simpleness is important. And then Louisa, she wrote Little Women, but she's a huge feminist and a suffragette. And she's one of the first women in town to vote. So I think when I think of those stories, that reminds me of why Concord's a special place. These people that kept kind of spoke up. Maybe people thought they were a little odd. Maybe they talked too much, but they got stuff done. So I hope that's what we try to do here today. I think you can understand what goes on in Boston in the lead up to the revolution, not really finding about Sam Adams. So Sam Adams would be an activist today. And we know that sometimes we Hillary activists, like, God, why are they speaking up? Why are they pushing at those meetings?
Yeah, we tend to attach a negative
Yeah.
label there.
And but if it wasn't for him, the protests in Boston never would have gone anywhere. He was like the mouthpiece of passion in the American Revolution. I think Frederick Douglass comes up here to New Bedford when he escapes enslavement. In his work in Massachusetts, he taught power does not that basically without the storm, things aren't going to get better. So he was not afraid to talk and speak and push at any time. So to me, he's another Massachusetts person. I think Louisa May Alcott, the way she talks about when they vote in Concord, women that get the first time to vote, all the women sign in Marjorie so-and-so, wife of, Harriet so-and-so, wife of. She puts her name on the top, and it says Louisa May Alcott, authoress. Because she was like super clear, I do not need a man to define me because I have my own money and I'm my own person. And she never gets married. I meet people on my tours every day who are like, wow, in school they didn't tell me these stories. They just made me memorize dates.
A lot of people like to rewrite history. What do you say about that?
I don't know if you can rewrite history so much. If there's new research, then I would say you're expanding history. Because there are things that we didn't know that now we know.
I think a lot of the things that they're trying to rewrite are the things that are difficult for us to understand that it happened. So we'll just erase that part.
Sometimes I think when people don't want to talk about the hard history, it reminds me of a family who doesn't want to talk about Uncle Fred. Like, oh, do I have to talk about Uncle Fred? Right?
La, 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 la.
Yeah, exactly. Can't we just have a nice holiday? Well, right? If we don't talk about Uncle Fred, we're not going to work this out. So we have to do that for the community. We have to do this in this town and sometimes as a country.
All right, so we're talking about Uncle Fred,
Right.
and I've got to ask you, let's talk about Uncle George and Uncle Thomas and a few others.
Yeah.
I have personally a difficult time with imagining these forefathers that I want so badly to revere.
Put them up on a pedestal.
And I want to put them on a pedestal because of what they did for us and what they foresaw and all of that. But at the same time,
They
how
owned
do you
people.
justify that they thought it was okay to own people? How do you do that? What do you do in your head?
Well, I think a couple of things. I think one, we have to remember we are not responsible. We personally, in our current time
day,
here, are not responsible for what those folks may have done. Right?
Totally agree. Yeah.
But we are responsible for knowing about it, because if knowing about it impacts things today, then we have to be knowers of it. So for example, if I'm working at Monticello and I'm not, but if we were at Monticello, those folks need to know the history of Jefferson and the hundreds of enslaved people he used, because they can't tell true history unless they tell that story. That doesn't mean that he didn't still write beautiful words in the Declaration of Independence, or he didn't still accomplish the things he accomplished, but we just have to know he accomplished it with the help of this stolen labor. I think you can hold both ideas in your head at the same time.
So you're telling me then to not expect these people to have been perfect,
No.
like any more than I can expect.
Right.
Any
We
of us.
don't expect each other to be
No.
perfect, do we?
Yeah, but we want them to be so bad.
That's the trouble, right?
We want them to be to be able to see into the future and write those beautiful words.
Well, especially after anyone dies. I don't care who they are. They are perfect after they're gone.
Yeah, all of a sudden,
Yes.
you die and you become a saint, at least to your family.
Yeah.
Oh, he was wonderful, and yet just a week ago,
He was really Uncle Fred.
Right, exactly. Right. But I think you're right. I think it's about just being honest with each other about we're talking about humans. And a human in history can accomplish amazing things, but they're a whole person. So we need to know about the whole person if you really want to know history. If you want to just live in myth, that's fine. But I don't think that's the true
not the real
education.
thing.
Yeah.
How does it make you feel to be able to share these stories with people?
Yeah, I just find that it's such a rewarding part of the day to get to meet people from all over the country who just want to sit and talk about and learn things. Yeah, I love that.
When you go home at night and put your head on the pillow, can you look back at the day and go, hey, I did something good today?
Yeah, hopefully, right? I hope that every day someone knows something they didn't know, or feels a different way, and is willing to work to make their community better, and their nation better, and their state better. Because that's what else we got, right? It's just us. There's
just
no one
us.
coming to help us, right? This is our thing here now. And when you look back in history, you see everyone else has done it. So we don't have an excuse, right? Those people, how frightened they were at the bridge that day, or at Lexington Green, or on the battlefields of Antietam, or It's scary, but they did it, so we can't not. I just know we're the what they say, the last best hope. As far as I know right now, we're the last best hope of the world right now. I wouldn't go somewhere else. I wouldn't trade my rights for something else. Yeah, I don't know enough about history to say it's the best ever, but it seems pretty awesome to me. It might get rough in the middle, but we always get to a better place.
Is our society, our culture, our politics cyclical? Is it really
I think
just
there
a
are
big...
cycles in history, yeah. And I think that a lot of us who grew up, I mean, I'm in my 60s, so we grew up in a relatively peaceful period.
Yeah.
And we haven't been tested in the way some of our ancestors have been tested. In our time, we're in a time of testing, I believe, and we'll rise to the occasion. I can't see why we wouldn't. We've done it every other time. Why wouldn't we? We'll figure it out.
We tend to agree with Joe. I think we're going to figure it out. Americans in general are good people. I mean, we all want good things. We want freedom and equality. And as troubled as our history may be, we've only made it better. We haven't really gone backwards. Thanks for listening to this week's edition of On the Road with Kelly and Bob, the USA 250 tour. Now, you don't want to miss anything this year, so best thing to do, head on over to our Facebook, Instagram, and our YouTube page. Like, follow, subscribe, tell your friends about it. You don't want to miss a thing. And you can listen to On the Road with Kelly and Bob wherever you get your podcast. Or the best thing to do, download that free Odyssey app. Listen anytime, anywhere.